Do you want to know how to turn any acrylic paint into the perfect pendulum pour mixture? Let me show you how. Hey everybody, it's Anna. Welcome back to my Fluid Art channel and thank you so much for stopping by. So you may have seen my painting from a couple weeks ago where I did a pendulum pour. I've done a couple of them this year and I really like pendulum pours. The basic thing with a pendulum pour is you have a cup or a bottle or something hanging on the end of a string and you swirl it around and it makes this cool oval pattern, and as it slows down the lines kind of overlap and the circle gets smaller and it just makes this really intricate, beautiful pattern. So it's really fun to do, but it takes a little bit of work to get your technique right. And the most important thing is your paint mixture. So to do a pendulum pour, you have to know what look are you going for. And the reason that this is important is because you might want really clean lines, or you might want kind of splattery lines. And based on what you want, you're going to mix your paint differently. So a couple months ago, I did this pour, which was a pendulum pour, and my paint mixture was kind of like a standard paint. I had acrylic paint mixed with Flotrol and water, and then it was mixed. I thinned it very thin, so it was kind of Dutch pour consistency. And then I used that in the standard way for my pendulum. The problem was paint mixed that way is not viscous enough to hold a really thin line all the way together. So it was wanting to break up into droplets. And it made this really beautiful mix of lines and splatters. And I love the way that it turned out. But that's not what I would consider a perfect pendulum pour. So a couple weeks ago I did another one. And I experimented with a different paint mixture and it worked like a dream. So I'm going to show you how to make that one today. The basics is, for really clean lines, you want a paint that flows nicely, but is also viscous, meaning it holds together. It has good surface tension. It doesn't want to break up into droplets. It holds in a stream. House paint is really good for this. But if you think, well, okay, so the only paint that I can use for a pendulum pour is house paint, you don't have a lot of options, do you? Or you have to buy all kinds of colors of house paint and that gets really expensive. No, instead you think, oh, I have all these other acrylic paints at home, why can't I use these? So I thought, what if I used some untinted house paint, which I have for a bloom, mix that with the acrylic paints, add some Flotrol, add some water, thin it down, worked like a charm. So let me show you how to do it. I've done a lot of talking. I'm sorry. Wanted to explain how I got here and why you need to mix it this way. So I have my scale because I'm going to measure by weight, though you could probably just kind of measure by estimating if you want. So I'm going to open up my house paint. So this is the Behr 8300 Deep Base. This is what Lisa Marvin recommends as part of the Bloom pouring medium. So this looks milky, but it's like Flotrol. It is actually quite clear. So let me start by mixing blue. I've got red, white, and blue today in metallics, very patriotic. And once I have these mixed, I'll show you how these paints work by doing a pour. But I'm going to add some of this to my cup. Oh, that's quite thick. I think this paint is old. It should still work okay, though. All right, I'm going to put in, okay, that's 0.35 ounces. So the ratio that I used before, which I really like, is 1 part paint to 2 parts untinted house paint to 2 parts Flotrol. So it's 1 to 2 to 2, and then you add water as needed. So it ends up being only 1/5 paint. And I just stuck my stick in there, which I shouldn't have done because I was going to use this. So this is very thick. Instead of pouring it, I'm just going to scoop it because I'm not making a huge amount. So I want 0.7 ounces of the house paint. Whoops, I'm making a mess already. Which should bring me to 1.05 ounces. The nice thing about a scale is you can be quite precise very easily without having to get lots of like measuring spoons dirty. Okay, there we go. 1.06. Perfect. Clean up that little splotch here. Okay, so I'm going to mix these two together because the house paint is thick and the acrylic paint is thick. So I'm going to blend those together first. Once I have the thick ingredients mixed, then we will add Flotrol. This is so thick. Okay, Flotrol, obviously large bottle, you want to strain it first. So I have this smaller bottle of pre-strained Flotrol, which I will be adding a little bit at a time until we reach about 1.75, which is another 0.7 ounces of Flotrol. But I'm going to add it just a little bit at a time because I want to make sure that everything is blending really thoroughly. Once your paint looks fully mixed and kind of creamy, then you can add some more. Yep, that looks pretty good. Okay, so this is my 1 part paint, 2 parts untinted house paint, 2 parts Flotrol, and as you can tell, it is still very thick. So even though the Flotrol did help thin it, we need a lot of water to bring this to a better consistency. And I don't know that I'll be able to fit it all in this little cup. I shouldn't have mixed quite so much. Might have to switch cups. So I'm just slowly working it in. I don't know exactly how much water I'm going to need, but I'll tell you, though that will vary based on your paint brand. Like a craft paint has more water in it. It's a thinner paint than a tube paint. This started out very thick, so I'll probably need more water for this one than you would for some others. Okay, so it's starting to flow now, but it's still too thick for what we're doing. Let me get a bigger cup, because this little 2-ounce cup isn't going to hold it all. Okay, a little bit more water. Now you might wonder, why add Flotrol at all? Why not just do paint and house paint and then thin with water, or use some other pouring medium? And that would be a good question. And the answer for me is that Flotrol helps thin your paint and make it flow well. The house paint adds the viscosity. The Flotrol, though, it makes it really flow nicely. But the other reason for me, okay, it's getting there. It's too thick of a stream right now. Anyway, the other reason for me to use Flotrol is because the majority of the pours that I do, I use Flotrol in the mixture, whether that's my primary kind of pouring medium that I add to my paints, or whether it's just one component. Flotrol is often in there. And when you do acrylic pours, you want to think hard about putting a paint that's mixed one way right on top of a paint that's mixed in a completely different way. For example, if you're doing a Dutch pour and your colors are mixed with Flotrol and your base paint is just mixed with water, they might interact strangely. Similarly, if some of your colors are mixed with glue and some of your colors are mixed with Flotrol or with a pouring medium, they're going to interact strangely. So having sort of a common ingredient of the Flotrol, even though the house paint is different, it makes them less likely to do something really strange, more likely to play well together. The other thing, though, with house paint is that I often paint with house paint. I mix that with Flotrol, and it works well with my other acrylic paints. So having that as part of the pouring medium, I don't look at that as being vastly different from any other kind of paint because it's one that I know works well with acrylic paints. It works well with Flotrol. So, okay, we're getting there. Look at this. Do you see how it flows off the stick? I think it needs to be a little bit thinner because it's still pretty thick. But it's got that nice long stream before it breaks up. Okay, we're getting close though. All right, okay. I think it needs to be just a little thinner, but do you see how nicely that flows? Just a tiny splash more water. Now, of course, my scale has turned off, so I can't tell exactly how much water I have added, but I will check on that in just a second. Okay. Now, the reason the stream doesn't last a terribly long time is because the stick doesn't hold a ton of paint, but I'm quite happy with that consistency. It flows very nicely, it holds together in a stream. Let me check. I'll turn that on again and get it zeroed out with an empty cup and then see. All right, so we had 0.35 paint, then we added 0.7 ounces of house paint, 0.7 ounces of Flotrol, which left us with 1.75, and now we're at 2.22, which is essentially half an ounce of water. So it's kind of like 1 part paint to 2 to 2 to 1, or maybe a little bit more than 1 part of water. But I would always add the water at the end and only add what you need. Don't think I'm going to add a specific amount because it's going to change based on the brand of your paint, the color of your paint, how old your paint is. So anyway, that looks great. I'm going to do the same with both of these. So this is another tube paint. This is a craft paint. I'm going to mix them to the same ratios with these ingredients, but I expect I'll need a lot less water with this one than I will with this or the blue. All right, let's go ahead and do it. I'm not sure what I was doing. I just put in way too much. Oh, silly me. I was forgetting that my pouring medium is like 4 times what the paint is, not twice. There we go. Starting out with 0.32 ounces. And I'm adding all the Flotrol at once with this one because it's already a thinner paint. I don't think it's going to clump up just because it's a craft paint. Yeah, it's not clumping. Okay, that's looking great. See, already this is flowing pretty well because the craft paint was thinner to begin with, but I'm going to add a bit of water just to get it exactly right. A little bit more. All right, that's looking great to me. Time for the last one. Well, once again, I think I mixed slightly too much for this cup, so after I stir in this water, I'll probably transfer it to a 3-ounce cup instead of a 2-ounce cup. So you might wonder why I'm mixing such small amounts of these, because if you've ever done a pendulum pour and you've used just a cup or something, you might find that you need several ounces of each color. The reason why I don't, why I only need about 2 ounces per color if I'm only doing one pass, one, pendulum cycle of each color, is because I use a very small bottle to do my pendulum pours, and I'll show you that in a second. And I do it in a particular way so that you don't waste a lot of paint. So, if you're wondering why the small amounts, stay tuned and I will explain. But let me get a bigger cup. Okay. So there's my nice thin stream. It's holding together well. Yeah, I like that. So let me just show you the 3 colors kind of side by side. Nice thin stream. Nice thin stream. Nice thin stream. All right, I think we've got 3 really good pendulum colors. So let me reset my table and I will show you how this paint mixture works in action. So let's get to it. So I actually decided to split this into 2 shorter videos instead of one really long video. If you'd like to see how these paints worked in action, click the link above to see the creation video for this pendulum pour. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys!